If you use the internet on a daily basis, and chances are you do, you probably don't put much thought into cybersecurity. You know, your network connections, the pages you visit, the files you download. You should be thinking about these all the time. Welcome to And Security for All. Your host is Kim Hakim. We're here to help you understand, in general terms, how and why your cybersecurity should be kept in check. Now, here is Kim Hakim.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of And Security for All. I'm Kim Hakim, your host. Super excited for our show today. Hope everyone's having a fabulous Wednesday. I hope you all had a great long Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully all of you cybersecurity practitioners out there got to take a little bit of a break. That may not be in your vocabulary, but I hope you were able to enjoy time with your friends and family. Anyway, we came out last week. We were out in Pittsburgh. So thank you to all of our Pittsburgh attendees. We had a great show. And next week, we're heading to Orlando, Florida. So again, our events have been pretty amazing this year. Packed houses. We're seeing more attendees than we've ever seen. I think people are really hungry for information. So if you're tuning in today, this is going to be a great show for you guys to be educated on what it looks like through the eyes of a pen tester, and we're going to talk about stimulating real world attacks. Today, I have Robert McCurdy. He's a security engineer and an offensive operations senior engineer over at Abira Security. Hey, Robert, welcome to my show.
Good afternoon over here, at least.
I know you're in Atlanta, right?
Yep, Atlanta, Georgia. Born and raised, so most of the stuff I've done the past 15 years is remote. So,
okay. Well, I know I see you at our Atlanta shows all the time, and I have so many people always say you need to get Robert on your panel or on your podcast, and we finally were able to do that. So I'm happy you're here. So tell me, Robert, how long you tell us a little bit about your career history and what you've been doing and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, I don't know, just kind of briefly, I caught the tail end of the BBS days, picking up the phone and your parents screaming into the phone and all that mess. And then kind of fell into like network security or network operations and realized that there wasn't a whole lot there. Back then firewalls were just firewalls. They weren't, all the layer appliances they are nowadays. And then, so I did IT for a while and then kind of sort of security for a while and then fell into doing like consulting for like KPMG. And that's kind of where the offensive stuff kind of took off. So doing local meetups and got picked up by some great folks on the KPMG side. And that kind of took off my, offensive security career and recently switched back to offensive security in the past, almost a year now. And prior to that, I was kind of on and off, mostly the blue team side, defense side, security operations, automation, SOC type of stuff. So SIM automation through all kinds of different means, and just kind of, it's nice to be back with the offensive side and the kind of that collaboration and aspect that I missed of being on a really tight team of really exceptional pen testers and professionals, information security professionals. So,
well, we're actually on a roll. We had our last week's guest was Boris, and I don't want to mess up his last name, but that was our topic, offensive security. So it's kind of nice to pull in pen testing too. And, I'm always fascinated by pen testers and what you guys are doing. So let's just kind of start a little bit from there. Like what originally got you into pen testing and offensive security?
It kind of starts just with that creative mindset. A lot of the IT folks and information security folks are, neurodiverse, and you end up kind of falling into that. How does this work? How does it work? And you poke things and you naturally want to understand and poke things that most people wouldn't poke, and you have a different way to look at things because your brain works differently. So they're prime candidates for information security professionals and even IT folks You're more creative, artistic, comedians, all those types end up being in that same area. So that's kind of how I ended up in the space, just being curious, and as a kid playing games and trying to cheat with your friends, and crash the game and see what you can do and see how you can mess with other people, not malicious in any way, but just to poke around and understand applications. And the more I messed with things, the more I poked with things, the more I realized I enjoyed watching things react when you poke them in a weird way. And that's kind of how you end up in IT, and then from there this industry, that whatever it is nowadays, I don't even know. So
Well, do you feel like with the fast pace of AI, is that how do you feel about that being a pen tester, and is that getting in your way, or is that making it more exciting for you? Like, do you have a few stories of some things that you have been challenging you lately?
hmm yeah, I mean, everybody wants to automate everything, and that's fine. We can do that, but you got to realize it's kind of like a pigeon that you're giving access to everything. So these attackers, or nation state attackers, they have the ability to mess up, or crash your internal server, or or affect production. But if you're doing this for a client, you can't exactly just go battering ram against and throw an AI in the mix. So all these articles about recent articles about these crazy models doing all this crazy pen testing, none of that actually applies to what we have to have as far as guardrails with these systems. So you know a lot of them, there's probably 30 of the pen testing things out there that are kind of the frontier companies that are around in that space, as far as I know. But I'm not much of a vendor guy, but there's at least 30 of them out there. And they all kind of do the same sort of thing. A bunch of scripts that are guided by AI, and there's some kind of human intervention in that pipeline, because you really can't let these things go crazy, because they will go and do very odd things. Like examples of you walk off and leave it, and it starts removing things, or it decides to use an API key that it found for production and start monkeying around with stuff, or tunneling traffic through Tor exit nodes when you didn't tell it to do that. And you walk off and let it do something, and it decides to go a little off the rails, even with all the steering and the prompting and all that. So that's kind of what you have to watch out for, is you got to watch these things. So we're using it pretty heavily for automation and reporting, and then that recon effort, and trying to make sure that we can capture as much as we can. And it really accelerates, it's that force multiplier, so it accelerates the learning. So I can hit a service, and instead of spending an entire day trying to understand this weird obscure service, I can talk to the AI and say, okay, what are the entry points? What am I looking for? Okay, well, here's this query you can run. Okay, run this JSON query, run this specific, look for this specific path. Okay, here's a default key for this. So it really, completely changes the game. Instead of spending 4 hours on something, I'm spending, maybe an hour on the same service, or kind of thread to pull. So instead of, kind of pulling out one or two things and then working on those, I can pretty much pull on all the threads at once. So if I find 4 or 5 things that are interesting, and I only have time to look at one of them, I will look at one of them, and then I'll take the other 3 and let AI chew on them in the background while I'm monkeying around with a service that might be more less equipped for the AI to really understand, because it needs to know a bunch of context about everything. So it really helps me catch up from not doing pen testing for basically 15 years professionally. I have a few personal projects that are around pen testing, but that piece is really a lot of just that. It's some force multiplier, and allows us to work so much faster, and deliver so much quicker, and do things a lot quicker. So hopefully, we'll get some guardrails and compliance and audit in place for these systems fairly soon, because right now, I got a text message about my prescriptions, and it was basically a ChatGPT interface, which I never signed up for, I never allowed, and I really don't want some AI chewing on my PHI that's already been, it's bought and sold 1,000 times over anyways. But that's kind of where we're at, is we're using these systems without any regard of compliance, security, or protections for the users or anything. It's just, rushing to that market, right?
Well, for a just average business owner that's, does not have a security team, maybe they have a few security, maybe there's one or two people, what are you concerned for them now? Because things are moving so fast. If you're
Sure.
not in the industry, how do you even know? I mean, most people don't even know what a pen tester is if you're not in the industry. So what would your advice be? I mean, it just seems like the world, we're moving at such a fast pace. Things are changing every day. We're seeing more and more attacks. So what is your mission? What are you trying
Yep.
to accomplish? And what would what would your advice be in a language that,
Sure.
somebody can understand? Because you're obviously super technical.
Mhm.
So how would you approach them?
I mean, the AI is just accelerating everything, entertainment and all the industries at once. So it's going to accelerate security, and people hopefully will start to put some more focus in that space, and you won't be able to ignore things for too long. Your AI is going to be better than my AI, and it's going to be, you know, um, who's got the better AI for their corporation, and which has got the best context around it, and how can we feed that and drive automation and remove the human from the loop, which is ultimately what we want to do, is go outside and play and touch grass. I have no problem with giving my entire everything over to AI if I can go outside and just play or do things that I want to do. That kind of got lost along the way when we became adults. But that's my hope, is that helps accelerate everything. But you got to feel the pain. These insurance companies, and I did some work for some local folks here in Georgia, and said, you probably don't have cyber insurance because they don't give you cyber insurance anymore. And it's like a special rider that you have to pay for. And you also have to prove that you're at least this tall to ride this ride. So these small companies that get targeted with business email compromise or any type of other attack that have literally no security, you're going to have to feel the pain, just like it's always been. It's that security theater until something happens, and then everybody runs around, with their hair on fire for 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever. And then they kind of fall back into the patterns of, that the AI is, or the security is the cost of the organization. And until, either insurance starts charging people for this, or, regulations come in, which are not in this administration, is going to happen. So we're kind of stuck with, you'll have to feel the pain at some point, like everybody else. And that's what I've experienced, is until something happens, until they feel the pain, or, that company is a security company, or they're a highly technical company, then they might focus on that piece of information security. But, it doesn't matter until something happens. Then that's kind of when people start paying attention, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people still don't believe that it's going to happen to them. It's not if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you're prepared for it. And I have that conversation all day long. I hear it at our events all day long. I hear a lot of third-party vendors talking about cyber insurance, and they, I won't mention any in particular, but are you saying you think it's just not paying out at all? It's not worth it?
I think I think as AI enhances the speed of the attackers, we're going to see more. Somehow, I listen to some of these podcasts. It's just a stream of 20 minutes straight of this happened, this got owned, this person got owned, this nation state got into this thing. It's just a stream of 20-minute podcasts of just all these horrible things that are happening. It's going to happen more, but we're already kind of desensitized to it anyways. So I don't know if it's really going to matter until it starts hitting somebody's wallet, or starts costing somebody, these corporations, money or something. So I honestly don't think it's going to change. It's just going to be more, we're going to be more desensitized to it, and it's just going to happen more, but it's going to start hitting people, grandparents, friends, relatives, fake AI stuff. I think Walmart is closing out. They're blocking transactions for $50, $100 on gift cards and stuff because they can't handle the amount of fraud that's coming through, these, but probably from autonomous AI mass, spamming and scamming. So I'm sure you've heard, I don't know if the horror stories of incidents, if you've heard of those have gone up since AI, but I think they're starting to trickle in. So I don't know if you've heard an uptick in like real bad, like we all got ransomware in our companies, either completely upside down or we're down for 3 days, 4 days, weeks. I don't know if you've heard more of those stories or less.
I feel like one thing that I've seen in 2026, I mean, I've been running these our conferences for decades, and 2026 is really different. Like I'm seeing almost double of attendees. So our events are local. So is management, are the board, are they encouraging people to go out and get more information? Because there's a lot to learn right now, and our events are very educational. So I just have to think, I've been doing this so long. I can't believe how many people are tuning in virtually with us and being on site with us. So I think that people can't get enough information ever, because things are changing on a daily basis. Do you see anything that like any type of gaps on like what are some of the biggest security gaps that you're still seeing today that you would have thought AI would have helped fix?
It's the same thing since forever. I mean, it's lipstick on a pig since the 2000s, right? We started, the attacks have changed. We don't see the type of stuff hopefully we used to see back in the 2000s, SQL injection or just straight up remote code execution type of stuff. So a lot of the stuff we'll see is just IDOR was like broken access essentially. But yeah, we're not going to see those effects for a while. Everybody's still writing code and going to market. So I feel like it's going to take a couple of years for us to for the attackers to reap the benefit of all this bad code. When we start connecting these agents, MCPs, whatever you want to call them, and we start having AIs talk to AIs and make decisions based, on the business's behalf, like that. It sounds like job security for me, but it just sounds like a nightmare for audit and compliance, and not to mention security. Like those two big things, that audit and compliance are more important than security. So like, I don't know how even they're going to do the audit compliance of this crap, much less, the actual part that really matters is the real nuts and bolts security of it. So yeah, it's just we'll just have to see. And it's like a live experiment, just like, letting our kids have tablets and let the corporations drive whatever they do on a daily basis. So we'll just have to see. But it'll definitely be different and exciting and challenging within the next few years. So it should be fun.
Well, it's interesting, audit and compliance, because people kind of make fun of those guys, like, that's the boring stuff, but it's not really, today,
I secretly like it. I like the policies and procedures and documentation, and only because it's a potential ban hammer to enforce. So you can say whatever you want, but if there's no policies, procedures behind what you can and can't do, then I can't say anything. The problem I've experienced with all these corporations is after, looking at documentation, you see the same document 15 different ways on SharePoint inside these large organizations. And it's like, look, we have the policies, we have the procedures, we can enforce, we can, it only takes a couple of people to be made an example for, to do bad things. And then people start to realize, okay, well, I can't do what Sally did because, she got malware on her machine, and then she did it again and they fired her. Like that type of stuff goes around quick. But, people in the States are so terrified about losing their jobs anyways. And the culture in that space is, I think what makes a lot of corporate America, because people can't that's my saying is, your baby's ugly, my baby's ugly. There's an elephant in the room over here. I don't really have time to establish relationships, whatever. If you don't want to play ball, if you don't want to make the team better, if you don't want to make the security of this organization better, then I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why you hired me. There's no point in me being here. So after kind of, having bad luck maybe, or just being in these corporations, I kind of have given up on some of that stuff, unless, I get referred by some friends or people in the industry that are saying, hey, it's a rock solid team. These are great people. We got support, and that's kind of few and far between, the more we move through this mess. So it's more of the same at that scale. So.
Yeah, I just last year when I was at Black Hat, there was a young girl, and when I say young, maybe 21, 22, maybe a little older. She had just gotten out of college, and she had volunteered for us at our LANOC event. And then I ran into her at Black Hat, and she said she did a meetup. She had a meetup. I met her at a party, at one of the parties, and she said she was having her own party, and she was in GRC, and she said, "Come on down." Well, we walked down there and it was packed, and she was like, I don't know if there's going to be one or two people that are going to show up. And it was great. I was really happy for her to see that she got that kind of community involved. I didn't end up going in because I felt like I would be lost, in those conversations, but I was happy for her, Yeah,
it's good to see people are interested, if it's because an AI bubble or whatever you want to call it. But I've gone to local meetups here that are about AI or about programming specifically. The entire room is full of probably developers that are terrified that they're going to lose their jobs, right? And that's, in that space, it's not about the code, but the leadership thinks that that's what it's about. So from what I understand, it's a very small percentage of actual code, and the rest is the people problem. All problems are kind of people problems. I had a direct report that told me that at one point in time. I kept struggling trying to solve people problems with technology, and I kept hitting brick walls. And then eventually he said, well, you know what, Robert, all problems are people problems. And I said, oh, well, I can't fix that. That's the one thing I can't fix when there's resistance and the blocking and the deflecting of some of these teams that, that wasn't my job before, and why should it be my job now? And who are you to tell me to do work? So that's kind of what it comes down to.
Well, let's kind of go back to pen testing a little bit, and tell me, in your experience, what makes a pen test especially challenging, especially in the world we live in today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like before AI, it was bad, because you had these CDN, content distribution networks, and like anti-DDoS platforms like Cloudflare and Azure and AWS and Google. They all had their own anti-bot mechanisms. So if you're not whitelisted, which was kind of impossible to do before AI, now even so, it's even worse. So all your e-commerce sites are protected by these CDNs, and when you're trying to do automated testing, you're gonna get blocked. And a lot of times that's just kind of how things are going. So I'm on an engagement right now where I send 100 requests to the server and I get blocked by Cloudflare. So I can't effectively do my testing unless I want to sit there and manually do testing, which will probably get blocked by Cloudflare anyways. So I can't effectively test when it was bad before, and it's kind of even worse now. But the good news is we're getting some kind of buy-in on doing whitelisting, doing more involved engagements that aren't just black box assessments. So we'll get usernames and passwords, different users at different levels of access, and being able to test some of that. Whereas when I was doing it probably 10, 15 years ago, you just were given a website and you try to own it remotely. So a lot of those things have kind of been closed down, or getting free access to a service, yields you, all the contacts and phone information for the entire, 150,000 employees of the organization. It's like, okay, well, here's your sign up process to do, to onboard contractors or whatever. you've unwillingly, disclosed, your entire contact list and their managers of every single person in the organization, which is not a great thing to have. So it's getting better from from the 2000s, but the idea is that we're getting more information, and the tests aren't so shallow as they used to be, I don't think. But they're also getting more complicated because everything is a web app now, and nobody hosts their own content. Nobody hosts their own services. So when there's a breach, it's like, well, it wasn't us. It was our widget provider. It's like, okay, well, it's still your backyard, and there's dogs in there, and they still poo. So you need to clean it up. Whatever you want to call it, it's still your children. It's still your pets. You need to maintain and care and feed them. That's that whole thing that gets lost. We paid somebody for the service, so we don't have to secure it. It's like, that's not how that works. So,
well, going back to Cloudflare, because they are one of our biggest customers, we have to shout out to Cloudflare. But for people like me that don't understand, I mean, doesn't that mean that Cloudflare is doing their job if you can't break through them?
Sure. Yeah. The idea there is, if with the right amount of time and the right amount of effort, you can kind of work around essentially web application filtering, WAFs. So if you know the target, for example, Cloudflare specifically has things where you can work around changing agent tags coming from different locations, proxying. I just had a client that I'm trying to help out locally. They're doing password spraying, which is basically where you're trying a bunch of different usernames and a bunch of different passwords from a bunch of different IPs, and the kind of algorithms aren't great at detecting some of those entry points. For example, some of the Microsoft shenanigans you can do to test credentials aren't a traditional login. There's some kind of API-based sort of login or whatever that's hard to detect without paying for like an E5 license that will cost you, an arm and a leg that these small organizations don't even have the ability to do. So, yeah, that's a big part of kind of, having visibility is the biggest piece. And if I don't have visibility, there's not really much you can do. If you don't have cameras, that's kind of the first step, is being able to see what's going on and have visibility. And a lot of these small companies and even large organizations don't have the visibility. They don't know what they have. They don't know what connects to what, and what's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon going on with these organizations. So,
Well, speaking of that, what do you think are some of the biggest benefits that organizations get from having pen testing?
yeah, it's the kind of understanding where you're at in your program. Some of the people I've consulted with, they don't necessarily need a pen test. They're not ready for a pen test, but it can give them an idea of where they're at in that maturity cycle. Okay, is everything falling over and breaking, and you touch it and it falls over, or you test a service and like the first thing you think to test to try to escalate or privilege or whatever, it works, and then the second thing you think of, it works. That's an indication that like no one has ever looked at that or tested that software before. So we'll see that every once in a while, and then they'll sometimes the vendor will reach out and say, the client will reach out and say, well, we've been paying this commodity resource we've been paying this big company to this company to do pen testing for the past 2 years. It's like, well, I don't know what their scope was, but pretty much everything I've tried to guess that this thing can do, try to get it to do, it works. So chances are I'm not even going to keep pen testing it, because everything I've thought of is just falling over. So, that's why they have built into some of these, GRC and compliance frameworks is, hey, have somebody test different every year. It's just like our administration. You got to roll out and put new heads in the game, because maybe the work that's getting done is being done by some intern somewhere, and it's not an actual license, or it's not a seasoned tester. So, it's nice that some of those are built in. Every 2 years or every year we have to get a different pen tester as part of that compliance and governance piece, which some people are surprised. They go to switch to a different vendor, and maybe they pick the one guy that's really good at web app testing, or the one guy that's really good at mobile testing, or the one guy one guy or girl that's really good at social engineering. And you find out very quickly, if there's so many arms and legs to this security stuff is you can't be an expert in everything anymore. The early 2000s you could, but now there's no way. There's not enough time in the world. I mean, I've only have one child, and there's not enough time to get my hands on everything. And even with AI accelerating me tenfold, I still can't keep track of all this mess.
So, are there downsides of pen testing that you have seen?
The only downside is just saying your piece, uh, and then not people not understanding the risk, and being uh, genuinely sensitive to people that you care about or organizations you care about, and not being understanding the risk. And you try and you say your piece, and then you let it go. And when I started early in my career, that was kind of the thing. So on the defensive side, after I left KPMG, some of the stuff I would find was just bad. And you try to communicate it, and you try to communicate it this way, and you try to communicate it that way, and it kind of it doesn't hit people, and it doesn't scare people, because their risk appetite is different. And then inevitably something happens, and you get to raise up your hand and say, I told you so. Remember the thing I set up 6 months ago? The thing you wouldn't let me turn on, that we were just monitoring for? Yeah, that's the thing. So there's been a couple instances where, jump up and down, jump up and down, jump up and down. And eventually, okay, well, that thing Robert set up, let's just go ahead and turn that on, because we've already been bit by this 3 times. And he kind of saw the writing on the wall. So it's that, level of support, and not getting it, and just being too passionate about the industry, and just not realizing that the business is the business, and businesses don't have to care about security, because it doesn't really, a couple insurance claims and you're off to the races. So yeah, other than reputation, really, and even that happens. I bid on stocks. People have a security incident. I watch their stock go down, and I buy it, and then it goes back up past where it was in 2-3 months. So I end up making some change on pretty much every time there's a big security incident at these too big to fail security vendors or organizations. So until it hits them in the pocket, there's not going to be a whole lot of change.
Yeah, and I guess, going back to the human side of things is you're only going to get the best. I mean, you could have a bad pen tester work for a great company and a good pen tester work for a great company, and you just have to hope that you get the good one. I mean, we see that all the time. I mean, I just had to get my garage door fixed, and six
Oh
months
Lord.
ago, I had the most expensive guy in town. He was here. He charged me barely anything. Then I went to a cheap person on accident. He charged me 3 times as much. So
Mhm.
I kind of look at that like, when you hire a security company, how do you know you're going to get the right? Budgets are tight. People don't have a lot of money. People know that they have to spend money on security, but what is your advice to these organizations of finding the right person?
There's just not enough to go around, right? There's not enough of us. There hasn't been enough of us that really care and are passionate, and more importantly, there hasn't been enough support for that industry, and caring about those things, because it just it doesn't hit anybody's wallet. So you got to feel the pain. And kind of even here in Atlanta, it's not real bad. The industry is kind of still, I think, what was it, a couple of years ago, parts of Atlanta, the internal government stuff was shut down. Atlanta was shut down for a while. It got ransomware, something like that. So it happens, and it's just going to keep happening, and things are going to accelerate. And that's, either going to be just more noise, or people are going to start taking some of the stuff seriously and start focusing on some of the things that get us in trouble, and get people's data compromised. But until there's consequences for it and people have to pay, there's not going to be. But the good news is at the end of the day, we're all just people, and people are generally good. And I feel like the more of us that are out there, and the more kids grow up, and this generation has got AI, growing up with AI, and they'll have their own AI agents, and they'll be more technology conscious and security conscious. Kids are throwing away phones and doing these dumb phones, and that whole ecosystem is starting to, make kids nervous, and even kids are starting to shy away from these platforms because they know that they're toxic and the whole industry is toxic. And you talk about the garage door stuff. It's the same kind of thing. That whole industry is kind of just the contractor industry is just toxic and not great. The same thing with the security industry. If every vendor is trying to sell you something, and a lot of those things can either be an AI prompt or just have been reinvented in some other way. It's just a different lipstick on different pigs. But the easy stuff is always the hardest to do.
Well, it's true. You think, 5, 6 years ago, every vendor, their tagline was zero trust, zero trust. Now their tagline's AI something,
Hmm.
We're not seeing the word zero trust anymore. We do see it, but it's not, AI is what drives their company. I mean, somebody's not going to go to you, I would assume, if you don't have some sort of, AI knowledge when you're
Hmm.
consulting to a company. So how, again, we're probably have about 7 minutes. I want to go back to testing and talk about, what is your advice again back to organizations when they're looking at their whole security posture? What is the
Hmm.
most important things that they should be doing today with AI? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
big question too.
Hmm. Yeah. It's about that visibility piece, and really understanding, having one or two people in the organization that can bring all of the context together. And that's why these AI platforms are so exciting, is because without having any technical knowledge, you'll be able to dump all of your SIM logs and your agent logs and your endpoint logs and all the business intelligence, all the business side of things, and then just talk to the model. So leadership can come in and say, hey, why am I having all these problems with logistics? Or why am I having these issues with vendor email compromise? Or why am I having issues with people's getting social engineered to click things? And you'll be able to ask plain questions and get real answers without going to, dare I say, humans that may or may not be qualified to, they're running a 5-person team, or maybe they're running multiple teams of people and they're not really in uh, the right level of knowledge to run those teams. So I feel like AI is going to force the business to understand where some of those inefficiencies lay. And hey, this whole group over here, all they do is like write rules for some dilapidated software that was written by RSA 15 years ago. That's all they do. And basically on a weekend, we can replace all that with a single service inside of a virtual container, and basically rewrite the rules and have them rewrite the rules themselves based on AI and stuff like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of, other than the laying off of a bunch of people that we've already seen, I think AI is going to help uh, get companies to understand. So lean into it from a security aspect and utilize AI to tell you, hey, I have telemetry from here, I have telemetry from here, bring it all in. And then you can start asking those human questions without having to pay some consultant a bunch of money. But that's usually few and far between, is that visibility aspect. Like there's not enough visibility you can give me. And whenever some of these organizations have issues, sometimes there's no visibility into be able to threat hunt or figure out what happened, because there's not enough of what understanding of what's going on in the organization. So for me, it's always, was it SANS top 20 or the top 20 is like that asset management. It's the visibility. Do you have visibility into everything? And once you do, heck, now you can just take all that visibility, dump it into AI and start asking questions about it without any technical knowledge at all, and get, real answers. And I think that's going to help bridge the gap between kind of this kind of cybersecurity poverty line, where if you're not a Fortune 500 and you don't have a team of 10 people doing whatever minimal work because they don't have support from the organization to do proactive stuff, being proactive with visibility is kind of those two biggest things in that security mindset. that is really hard to do, and I've only seen it a handful of times with that level of support, and then it only lasts so long as there's somebody around to hand wave and break down doors and burn bridges and things like that to really keep that beat going.
Well, in the industry, like you said, we've seen a lot of people getting laid off. We've seen, I mean, I can't even, there's so many CISOs that, are unemployed right now that are being, be CISOs and consultants. And why do you think that is? You think it's budgets and they just, I've talked to a few of them and they're just like, well, they're just paying less and, promoting within the organizations and cutting costs. So is that scary, do you think? Or
I think it's like anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think it's just the AI has somehow lowered the bar for the entire industry? Or do you think it's just post-COVID, the current, I don't know, leadership environment, why things are whatever? Because I've noticed that some of the positions that have come across just random LinkedIn posts and stuff are kind of lowball and not like the heyday of 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think COVID gave us a hit, and then maybe the regime and the leadership and the that aspect of it, and then now the AI stuff. And it's kind of, I don't know if you think the AI has resulted in that going down, or if it's a result of kind of the trickle down of administration and COVID and all that, if we're still experiencing stuff from that.
Yeah, it's we're all over the country, so I have a lot of friends that are, right now looking for jobs. But then you hear the industry say, and we can go down a big tunnel on that. We hear the industry say there's not enough employees out there, but then on the other side, there's a ton of them that are looking for jobs. And I also think people are going back to their office. It's not as remote as it used to be. I think that's with some of the bigger organizations. Okay. But what, just ending on something, let's end, we could talk about all the doom and gloom of this industry so all the time. But what are some of the positive things that you've seen this year in 2026? What excites you?
It's as bubbly as the AI stuff is, it does have lots of potential, and it's that for people that are passionate and are somewhat interested in technology, they can use it to accelerate. And I don't have to spend 20 minutes drafting an email to somebody about how to explain a particular finding. I can copy and paste the email, copy and paste the alert, give it some context, and go off to the races. So instead of spending 20 minutes on something, I can spend 2 minutes and replying to some incident or some email or event. So the AI is kind of, as long as people are willing to use it for the right reasons, that's going to help. And it's going to start just kind of shedding light on things at scale that we've never been able to do. Kind of, I'm sure you've heard, all the disclosure stuff is getting flooded. People are shutting down disclosure programs and locking the doors, and people are all up and down about multiple vulnerabilities being posted. These are all good things. It's like any tool, like any technology, we have to adjust and, fight fire with fire, or fight fire with water, whatever the guy says. So that's kind of the good part of it, is that, it's put kind of some new blood into the industry, and has allowed people that are passionate about it to use AI to accelerate what they know and learn. And you can learn so much faster than you could back in the day. You had to look around and search online and then read a bunch of documentation and then mess with it on a local lab somewhere. But now, you can do all this stuff remotely. And it's interesting. You have some of that piece of, you're wanting to see butts and chairs. And I feel like it's kind of a light switch thing. Every 2 years they flip the switch. It's like, all right, everybody's going back to the office, so let's flip the switch. And then some new leadership comes in somewhere, and all right, well, we're going to let people work remotely. So they flip the switch, and then 5 years later, all right, we need butts and chairs again. So they flip the switch. So none of it really, I don't know if any of it really makes any difference. But I'm very high on, collaborative and hybrid environments. But definitely just more people interested and more people involved in technology, and growing up with technology helps a lot. I mean, these kids, my 12, 10, 8, 7-year-old had access to AI images when he was in elementary school. Like, that's terrifying to me, but that's the name of the game. That's where we're at. And we just kind of had to do this live experiment and see where it goes. So,
Well, there was so much more I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm happy I finally got you on my show.
good
Anyone,
times.
yeah, anyone that wants to get a hold of Robert, if you have any questions for him, you can find him on LinkedIn. It's Robert McCurdy, and he works at Abira Security,
Mhm.
and you can find him on LinkedIn. He's out of Atlanta, and he's, as you could hear today, a very, very smart guy. I don't know what else to say. I just know that you would be someone I would want to hire in Atlanta. So keep doing all the good work that you're doing out there, Robert. And thanks so much for being on the show today. We appreciate
Likewise, you
it.
keep it going, and I don't know how you do it, but we have so much working against us. But it's good to have some positive experiences when we go out to the conferences and meet new folks that are interested um, in the space. So it's a lot of fun to go down there.
Well, awesome. We'll see you. We'll be back out in your neck of the woods in December. So we'll see you then. So
Sure.
thanks, Robert. If everyone else, thank you for joining another episode of And Security for All. Again, you can find any of these podcasts on any place that you do listen to your podcasts. And you can go to FutureCon YouTube channel as well to find them. Everyone have a fantastic week. I hope you all stay safe and secure, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.